TN News.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and on this hour we'll be focusing on the tea industry. Now, recently a raft of regulations was announced by the CS for Agriculture, Peter Munya, and stakeholders would like to, respond to that and see how this is going, and we're going to see how this is going to affect them, both the positive and the negative. And joining me for this discussion this morning is the MD for East African Tea Association, Edward Mudibo. Good morning, Edward.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, let's just start off with your reaction on that raft of measures. Was it beneficial to the industry or the sector, or do you feel like it was a bit lopsided?
The tea regulations, which were draft tea regulations, which were published first and foremost, were long overdue.
Right.
We waited for 7 years. To have regulations to enforce the Crops Act 2013. And so our expectation was that we should have perfect regulations that shall drive the tea sector forward for years to come.
Yes.
But as it is now, the tea regulations fallen short of the desired expectations of members. We may say about 30% is positive, but 70% still needs to be looked at.
Okay, so Mr. Mdibo, let's start off with the 30%. What are the positive elements that came up with this new raft of changes and regulations that you can say will have a positive impact on the tea sector?
Some of the areas we may look at which positively would come out are the ensuring of adequate leaf supply before granting of the license. That is before the factories are granted licenses. That comes out well. Then there is also a mechanism of licensing and renewal. I mean, the licensing of factories and renewal of the same. The other aspect that comes out strongly is also sound governance of the tea producing companies. Some kind of regulatory framework comes out there. So also the regulations provide for the adoption of technology and a little bit of the electronic trading aspect.
Yeah, you have mentioned, for example, the licensing issues, and what I hear that could be quite good is the fact of that technology will be incorporated. Could you explain deeper how this is going to change things for stakeholders in the tea sector?
The aspect of technology is that currently the EATTA, or the auction organizer for that matter, as the auction organizer, has been running on a manual setup. Our move to have the auction automated is purely to make members be able to bid through their laptops. They will no longer have to have a physical presence coming to the auction. So they'll be able to bid for the teas. The buyers will be able to bid for the teas from their offices, comfort of their offices.
Right.
And that in itself helps out in terms of making sure.
Unfortunately, we have lost Mr. Mudibo on that one, and we're going to sort out that technical issue. But of course, he's going to touch on he has been talking about how licensing has been shifted in a way that is going to be positive for stakeholders, and of course, the element of ensuring that tech is incorporated in everything. It seems like going forward, the economy will not be able to function without tech, even though we might experience some hitches like the one that we'll see seeing right now, but it's quite important. And as he said, it's very good to have the tea sector improved in terms of technology to ensure that those who are involved are able to keep up with the changing times and ensure that they go on with the economic, activities in a way that is keeping up with the rest of the world. Because when it comes to some of these things, we are indeed playing catch up. Now, another element that he did point out is that 30% of the draft of measures that were announced by the CS Peter Munya were positive, while 70% not quite the things that they would hail as good for them. And we're going to be looking deeper into that, and he'll go now into the 70% that they feel is not necessarily good for the tea sectors, and the importance of and need for regulation in the tea sector, both locally and this association that he manages is overviewing the whole East African region that is one of the leading exporters of tea to the world. So we're going to be touching on exporters, value addition. We're going to look at brokerage services, tea farmers and producers. EATT is also going to look at the auction organizers and see, like he's pointed out, that they will be able to be part of auctions via technology, for example, Zoom and what have you. But at the same time, it will be important to look at how these some of the regulations are impacting them, or they foresee them impacting them in a negative way. So that's quite important. If you're a tea farmer, if you're affiliated with the sector, this is going to be a very important discussion to be a part of. But back to the other discussion we were having earlier on, we were talking about the behaviors that might be making us more of the victims of COVID-19 rather than survivors, and trumping over the spread of COVID-19. And we did ask you earlier on to be a part of the conversation by answering the question online and telling us whether you agree that it is irresponsible behavior that is behind, or rather contributing to the rise of coronavirus infections, particularly in some of these flashpoints that have now been locked down. We're talking about Old Town in Mombasa and Isili. Do you think it is our bad behavior that is leading to the spread of COVID-19 in that way? Get on Twitter, tell us what you think, and we will be making you a part of the conversation. Perhaps tell us what you have noticed in your local communities that could be the irresponsible behavior that might be contributing or would contribute to the spread of COVID-19. And we will go on with our discussion. Remember, you can reach me at Trix Ingado or at Michael G. Gitonga, and the official hashtag for that is KTN Morning Express. Now, getting back to a discussion on the tea sector, sorry for that hitch. We are, as a reminder, we're joined by MD East Africa Tea Association, who is Mr. Edward Mudebo. Thank you. Glad to see that you're back with us. Now, you were mid-sentence telling us about how tech is going to improve and that regulation is going to improve the situation for the tea sector in the region.
I was in the matter of automation, and
yes,
indeed, when we are in this phase of the COVID-19, in itself, there'll be no issues of distancing, because then members will be able to buy teas from the comfort of their offices, as I'd intimated. But importantly, automation comes with issues of enhancing efficiency.
Right.
And price, even enhanced price discovery. More teas are able to be sold at any given moment. And there'll be a lot of added value with automation when we compare this with the manual outcry system we've had at the auction over the past 22 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, those are, you've just pointed out some of the positive elements and how they would positively impact the sector. Now, let's look at that comparison that you're given, 30% to 70%, not very good. So my next question would be that did the authorities that be consult with you stakeholders before rolling out these regulations?
I would say without fear of contradiction that in this set of regulations, tea regulations 2020, the tea stakeholders were not consulted.
Right.
And possibly that explains why we have a lot of gaps in the draft regulations. In previous regulations, draft regulations, we've been consulted. In fact, we even had a public hearing in 2019.
Right.
But this new raft of regulations came up with a lot of changes which were not explained to the stakeholders. We have also to take in hindsight that we do not have a coherent national tea policy. So ideally, you should have a national tea policy. Based on that, you'll have a tea legislation. And it is out of some tea legislation that you can have regulations. We didn't go through that process.
And this is being reflected in now the measures that are putting forward. But would you say that these are only considering maybe the government and the tax returns that would come out of the sector rather than the good of the people in the tea sector?
It actually reflects more on what the government wanted to see done. But when we look at the various key stakeholders within the tea sector, starting from the producers, warehousemen, the exporters, the brokers of tea, and the packers, it's not indicative of what we desired to have. And I'll give specific examples.
Okay.
To start with, we look at the matter of value addition, where the government seeks to enhance value addition to 40% of the export quantum. That is not attainable by a buyer overnight.
Why is it unrealistic?
For a country like Sri Lanka, for example, it took them 20 years to reach that 40% threshold. And even then, the government put in a lot of resources and infrastructure to make it work. So value addition, nobody is opposed to value addition, but the way it is being done in terms of forcibly requiring members to comply does not help out much.
Okay.
Another area, again, that comes out, which is in conflict, is the matter to do with buyers. Buyers are being asked to place a performance bond of 10%. But as it is right now, the buyers at the auction do not have to pay for any deposit. They pay for their fees on collection, and they pay in full, not in part. So that again is another requirement we find. We'll only add the cost, which will finally filter to the farmer we are supposed to protect.
So I'll pause you there. The 40% value addition, how long will it take for Kenya, to achieve this sort of value addition, which is good, as you pointed out, but how long realistically would it take to get to that level?
We really do not even have to be looking at the quantum of 40%. The industry players have been suggesting on anything above 10% would be good enough. Take into account their countries which will not. Pakistan is our biggest market. They consume about 40% of the market share of Kenyan teas. They don't require any teas in the value-added form that is defined by government. The government has also failed to recognize the blending of teas to be a component of value addition. So that in itself weakens the whole perspective of how we handle this value addition arrangement.
Okay, right. And what about the issue of brokerage services?
On the brokerage services, the attempt in the regulations is to provide that each broker should not exceed handling more than 15 companies or factories. Each of the brokers. So we have 12 brokers currently who are members of the East African Tea Trade Association. And no broker has complained that there is so much work. No producer has complained that there's been less service delivery. Now the question is, what is magical about the number 15? And what is that supposed to solve? What is the mischief that is being solved by government? By limiting. That in itself is anti-competition. Let the buyers or the producers choose whom they want as a broker. And that's the way the liberalized market operates.
Other levels of the regulations that you're not happy about, perhaps let's talk about tea farmers and those producers. You said those in the sector have not been consulted. What are the other ways in which these regulations are not favoring them?
We look at the matter of management agents. This now will relate to the producers that you've intimated. Again, our take is that government is trying to institute measures on the management agents. Conditions on the management agents whereby a management agent should not serve for more than 5 years.
Okay.
And in addition, that in terms of interpretation, the management agency service should not include company secretarial services. But you can see this was being targeted to one key company taking care of the livelihoods of the small-scale holders. We need uniformity. This is against the law of contracts. It's against the Competition Act. Why would you want to get involved into day-to-day arrangements of a company that has served the interest of the farmers for so many years?
Right.
And in this regard, I'm looking at the Kenya Tea Development Agency. It appears this specific regulation was targeted to one entity, which is a private company and which has served the 69 tea factories very effectively. So to come up with such a regulation doesn't solve anything. It only makes the cost to the farmers much more dear.
Right.
So we would like that such aspects be left to the companies to run on their own. Let the factories choose. I mean, in this particular context, the factories themselves have been well covered under the ambit of the agency. So we find that apart from that, there are also other management agencies, which I may not have to mention all. Even to them, this particular provision would not serve their best interests.
So not good for for you as also part of the tea sector. Let's talk about the East African Tea Traders Association as an auction organizer. How have you been affected, or how do you feel this would negatively impact you, some of these rafts of measures?
Now, as the auction organizer and the only one in the country,
yes,
one thing that has to be understood is the East African Tea Trade Association has served the interests of 10 countries on the African continent effectively. And these are, apart from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, Congo, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, and even Ethiopia. They've been served very, very well through this platform. These teas are destined and brought to Mombasa for purposes of auction. Now, the regulations have come in to provide that the cabinet secretary should first of all approve of the regulations we have.
Yes.
The same time, the guidelines have been provided on what regulations should entail.
Okay.
We find this as unnecessary. It's too operational for the cabinet secretary to get involved in. We've been self-regulating as an association. IATA is a private company limited by guarantee. Right. And none of the members has complained about poor service. It's not from Kenya and not from the other African countries. So we have even gone further. This particular association, on any auction day, we have live streaming, so you can view the proceedings of the auction on Mondays and Tuesdays, any other time. That just goes to show the level of transparency we have in our dealings. We are moving further to automate, as I'd intimated. Yeah.
Now, when you talk about tea buyers, there being a conflict with such elements as the Competition Act, what would you foresee as a possible solution moving forward? You are unhappy with some of these regulations, so are you going to seek redress in court? Are you going to seek more consultation for these things to be changed? What would be your plan of action as the East Africa Tea Traders Association?
First and foremost, as I address that particular component, we also look at it as an association. One is even for the buyers of tea, they're being compelled to buy 100% from the auction and no direct sales window. Right now, IATA comfortably receives about 75% of the market share. The rest goes through, 25% goes through direct sales. That in itself, again, is anti-competition. We are saying, let the market forces prevail. Ideally, you'd be saying, I should be happy about getting 100% to the auction, but we must look at all members. EATTA is owned by all members across the value chain, so we have to be fair to each other. Nobody has suggested or proposed that we should have 100% market share. Absolutely. Now, in terms of way forward, is that we are looking forward to deliberating further with the Cabinet Secretary. We expect that during this month, they should be compiling a report looking at the feedback from the members, the key stakeholders. Our expectation is that we should see that final report and further proposed amendments to the draft regulations. Thereafter, we expect that possibly they should go through the due process and should go to the right parliamentary committee on delegated legislation.
Anything else you'd like to add briefly, because we've run out of time?
It's that we as key stakeholders, look forward to having regulations that shall be in line with the Constitution, in line with the other acts of Parliament, and also regulations that respect international treaties. To that end, we should be able to support what comes out so long as it respects the wishes and desires of the tea sector holders.
Thank you very much. That is the Managing Director for the East African Tea Traders Association, coming to us on how a raft of regulations recently rolled out by the CS Peter Munya are affecting those in the sector and what needs to be done to tweak them to ensure that it is a win-win situation. And of course, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you right here on Morning Express.